at least kick us off and get us started with like introductions. I don't uh, I don't know if you guys want to introduce yourselves, but I'm Stephanie, and I'm with the Greater Cincinnati Grotto. We do a web meeting once a month to introduce a technical topic, um, and it's sort of whatever local cavers are interested in doing. So we try to do the knots clinic twice a year, just because knots are pretty foundational to a lot of the things that we do in caving. There's entry skill requirements both for NCRC and now the new VTC. The VTC list is condensed, but all of the same knots are included within the NCRC list. So for the entry checkoff skills, um, you're expected to know these knots ahead of going to the class. And we just wanted to make sure that at least folks local to the grotto had accessibility to getting some help before having to get tested first thing. So if anybody else was interested in introducing yourselves, feel free. Otherwise, I'll jump into discussing knots, and if you have any questions or anything like that, just holler and stop me, basically, and we'll troubleshoot what you've got. All right. So the cover photo of the event, we had the NCRC knots listed. I did also mention on that slide, there's 2 bonus knots that we seem to get as questions every time we hold a knots clinic. And those 2 knots in particular are the fusion knot and the double bowline. It seems that within the caving community, those have become popular as a double anchor or like a double eared knot. Now, I think there's a couple disadvantages to using them. There's one advantage, which is that they're easier to untie, but ultimately, if somebody brings that up, we end up talking about those as well. The knots that are on the list, we've got figure 8 on the bite, figure 8 follow through, the double 8. So that's like a family of knots. Then there's the butterfly, the munter hitch, clove hitch, bowline with a safety, and the water knot is done in webbing. The double fisherman's is how you create a prusik loop, and then there's the prusik hitch itself, and the square knot, which is actually a bend. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go start with the figure 8 follow through and then go into the bowline with a safety, because those are both anchors that are directly anchored onto, or they're both knots that end up getting directly anchored onto your anchor. So think about like big tree or big rock or something like that. That's what we're going to start with. So I've got this chair behind me, and my chair is my anchor in this particular case. You can find like a chair leg or something like that. But what I'm going to do is I'm trying to make sure that this is in the screen for you guys. I'll start with the figure 8 with a follow through. So taking the end of a piece of rope, what we're going to basically do is trace what looks like the number 8. And you can see how that sort of looks like an 8 right there. And I'm going to put the end of the rope through. And this is what's considered a single figure 8. And you can kind of look at the number 8 in that. So I'm going to give myself a little bit more to work with. Basically, that's all that is that's the 8. And you trace it literally like the number 8. And so that's a single figure 8. And what we're going to do is, if this was my tree, it's a little skinny tree here, I'm going to basically loop around my tree, and all that the figure 8 follow through does is it literally follows through. So if you look at the 8 that I've got in my hand here, what I can do is I look at the other side that came out, and I'm just going to trace that around. So it's a follow through because it's literally just following. And if you are going to follow on the inside, you're just going to stay on the inside of the parallel to the other strand that was already tied there. And so That is now traced through. I'm going to tighten down my knot and make sure that everything is set and dressed. And what that means is that my strands are parallel to each other and that they are not having like a twisty cross in them. And as you'll notice that my tail here is about 4 inches. The NCRC likes to see their knot tails at least 4 inches. And the reason why is that if this were to like loosen up or something like that, and that was a really short tail, it might back out on itself. And we don't want our knot to back out on itself. So all we did there was we made that single figure 8, looped it around our anchor, and then traced the strands over each other. I'm going to undo this. And then we will work our way into the bowline. So the bowline is another knot that also is done around an anchor. And the way that the bowline is tied, it has the opportunity where it can capsize on itself. So what we want to do every time we have a bowline is we also have a backup. And that can either be in the form of an overhand knot or a Yosemite finish. And I will show what those look like. So to tie the bowline, my friend Bo likes to say you start the car. So you turn the key to the car, basically. And let me give myself more to work with here. Okay. So I'm going to turn the key to my car. And what you can see here is I've got a hole now. And what I want to do is I'm going to create basically like a tree. And so the way that I think about it is this hole is in the ground. The tree grows out of the hole. So it has to have its roots under the hole. And so you can see here that this strand is under my hole. I'm gonna basically, somebody told it to me, a new rhyme for this. The end of the rope is the caver. The caver comes out of the hole, goes around the tree to go pee, and then goes back into the hole. And I did that wrong, so give me a second here. Looking at the camera and not at you, at the knot here. So the caver comes out of the hole, goes around the tree to pee, and then goes back into the hole. Now, one of the things that you'll notice is that my strand that went back in is on the inside, and that's good in this case because I can tie a Yosemite finish for that reason. What I'll do really quickly here is demonstrate how this knot likes to capsize. If you were to pull this kind of like with a directional force here, you see how this strand straightens out? And once it straightens out, what can happen is this can slip through. Now I had a really long tail, so it wasn't wanting to slip through. And so that is how this knot can fail. And that's why we always have to have a backup on that. So we're going to, again, turn the key to the car. I've got this strand underneath, and my caver comes out of the hole, goes around my tree, and then comes back into the hole. So that's what a bowline looks like. And I've got this long tail here. What I can do to have a stopper knot is I can either create an overhand knot at the base here, and that will stop it. So if I were to pull real hard on that, it won't capsize. The other finish that we can do for this is, this is that bowline again. And because I have the loose strand on the inside, I can go under, back around, and we're just going to trace this collar. So it traces the collar. So it's following that this collar here, and that collar comes out of the center of the bowline, so it comes out this way, and that's called a Yosemite finish, where it comes back around the collar a second time. Now, if that's hard for you to follow, basically the thing to know about the bowline is that as long as you've gotten the bowline tied, um, it just needs that stopper knot. And what you can do is just put an overhand right here to do that. So that's just maybe an easier way for some people to do it. All right, so those are the two knots that are basically based off of an anchor itself. Um, what I'll do is we'll start getting into some of the knots that are basically either on a bite or something like that. So part of a piece of rope. So what I've got here, I'm gonna do the figure 8 on a bite, and with the figure 8 on a bite, again, we always need to make sure that we've got a 4-inch tail at minimum in order to make sure that the tail doesn't suck back through the knot and get lost. And then ideally you have a 2 to 4-inch bite on the head of the knot, so that it's efficient. Like 2 inches is plenty for like a carabiner to go through. Um, and then if you have like a 4-inch bite, you might want that in certain scenarios where if it's a stopper knot, um, that 4-inch bite, similar to the tail, won't accidentally suck through the knot and get lost. So when I do a figure 8, what I do on a bite, when I do a figure 8 on a bite, what I do is I think about that 4-inch tail, and I have that kind of measured out. I think about that 2-inch bite, so I kind of have that measured out. And in between, you can see I've got about a foot of rope between that tail and my bite. And that's because it takes about 10 inches to a foot worth of rope in order to be used in the body of the knot. So in my brain, I kind of like measure it out a little bit first. Like I've got a 4-inch tail, I've got about a foot of rope for the knot itself, and then kind of a small tight bite here of rope. Um, the way that I tie my figure 8 is I actually move the tail, because what I have found for myself is that I have a better dressed knot in the end if I move the tail end of the rope rather than the bite end of the rope. And simply because, like, as you're twisting the rope around, I'm able to work my twisties out of the back end of the rope. And so the twisties exit rather than get stuck within my bite. So this is just a way to do it. There's multiple right ways to do it, but what I do is I pinch the tails within my thumb and first finger here. You can see my bite is laying across my palm. Um, and so it lays downwards and across my palm. What I'm doing is I'm going to take the tail end of my rope and I make a finger gun. And that tail end of the rope, I bring it around and I basically have like an awareness ribbon. You can see it just like makes this little scarf bow tie X thing right here. And so there's my tails and there's my bite. And so far I'm able to have all my strands be nice and parallel, as you can see. So there's where that finger gun stays, right? I'm going to just use my thumb to pinch where that X is. The bite now, I'm going to just fold it across the front. So you can see at a 90-degree angle, it just folded across the front. And then where my fingers from my finger gun are, I'm going to insert the bite from the back. And you can then pinch the head of that knot. And I'm going to pull the 2 strands from the tail. And you can see I've got a nice set dressed knot. Basically all my strands are parallel and I don't have any twisties or crosses between the strands. So they're staying parallel to each other. Now, what do you do when you have an undressed knot, right? Like what's the disadvantage to an undressed knot? So an undressed knot might look something like, I'm gonna forcibly force a undressed knot here. It might look something like that, right? And that's kind of subtle. But you can see where the strands have crossed each other over here. Really what that does is it's harder to recognize your knot, and when it gets loaded, it can like pop a strand over something else, or nominally, like people say, oh, it makes it weaker. I mean, the rope is super strong in the first place, so like I'm not personally super worried about that. But what it does make it do is it's harder to recognize and it's harder to untie at a later date. So just something to think about there is having nice set dressed knots can be one, safer, but two, more recognizable, and three, easier to untie in the future. So if you do find that your knot's just not super parallel or dressed, all you have to do is, pick at it, flip the strands, and make sure that everything's nice and parallel to each other. Now, the figure eight, once it has been loaded, it can be hard to untie, right? So, what I like to also do is teach you guys how to untie it the easy way. Um, I see a lot of people kind of just like struggle trying to wiggle this bite back down through the knot. And if it's been very, very loaded, that's actually kind of hard to do, is like wiggle that back down. The weak point of the knot is actually at the base right here. So these two bottom strands. And all I do, just as a small weak person, I grab the meaty part of my hand that is under my thumb. And all I do is I break the knot first. So I push it down and push it down like that. And that should loosen up your knot enough that you can pop the bite through. So that's just small weak person way of untying your knot. Now, I'll give the next iteration of the eight in the eight family is the double figure eight, and that's sometimes called like the bunny eared eight. The reason why we like that one is if there's like two anchors, say, like in cave when people have drilled bolts and they're putting anchors and they're hanging their knot for a double eared knot, it's able to share load between those two anchors. And we like those sorts of knots for that reason. And there's iterations off of that where it can be even more than a double eight, or you can have like three or four anchors. I've heard of somebody anchoring to like 8 different locations before because they had very, very weak rock, for example. So like the double eight is common in the NCRC world and the VTC world for that specific rigging scenario where it needs to share the load. Um, what is nice about the using a double eight rather than a bowline on a bite or a fusion knot is that the double eight is easily recognizable because you don't know who you're working with sometimes, and the double eight is a very easily recognizable knot, and it's very, very easy to tell. Yep, that's you know um, tied correctly, and it's a safe one. Whereas some of those other options, like the bowline on the bite or the fusion knot, are not as easily recognizable. The other thing to note is that the fusion knot and the bowline on the bite both do have the ability to capsize the same way that the bowline that I showed earlier can capsize. Um, and all you would do, again, similar to that case, you would basically just tie a stopper knot if it was at the start of the rope. Um, but I personally, as a small weak person, have um, a tendency to get sucked into the bottom of the fusion knot if I use it as an anchor. So I have a slight preference to using a double eight. Now, part of the reason why people use fusion and bowline, double bowline knots is because they also can adjust the strands pretty easily. But I'm going to show you guys a trick on how to do the sizing for a double 8. So the double 8 actually can be sized very, very nicely when you know where your anchors need to be. So say I had an anchor here and an anchor here. Um, the thing to kind of look for when you're doing double eared knots is you want your forces to pull evenly on the two anchors. You don't want to end up with like um, a scenario where you could cause more force on those anchors than just having like one anchor effectively. So uh, we want to share the load as much as we can between those. So what I like to say is peace sign is good. That's about a 30-degree angle. And if you had your ears on your knot at about that 30-degree angle, you're sharing it about 50-50 on of 50%, 50% of force on each anchor. Um, and what I say then is L is for loser, because then you're getting into like a 70% share on those two anchors, because that's a wider angle here. So it's pulling the rope outwards, and that's causing more force on the rope. And then you don't really want to be hanging loose when you're doing rope work, right? So we say hang loose sign bad, and that's about 120 degrees, and that's actually putting 100% force on each of your two anchors when you've got those ears spread out really wide. So what we like is nice long ears, and those long ears will make sure that we get that nice tight angle, and that tight angle enables us to distribute the load between the two anchors a little bit better. So if I had my anchor here and my anchor here, in my brain, I'm going to like look at where my knot should be in order to give me that nice tight angle. And I think my knot should be maybe around here. So if I know my anchor is here and I want my knot to be here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the tail of my rope and look for that 4-inch tail. So minimum, I need that 4-inch tail. I'm just going to put my hand where my knot should be. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to string my rope up to where that first anchor should be. I'm going to drop that ear. I'm going to string more rope up to where my second anchor should be. And then what I'm going to do is I've kind of got it bunched up where I want that knot position to be. I count that additional foot of rope that gets sucked up into the body of the knot. And then basically I'm going to bring that up to my hand as well. And all I'm going to do is drop the bite. And you can see I've got a big bite now, and that's about how much rope it takes to get evenly shared between those anchors. So you'll always have a perfectly sized 8 if you kind of just think about that force vector, put your hand where that knot is, or knot should be, string it up to the first anchor, string it up to the second anchor, and then give it that 10 to 12 inches of rope for the rest of the body of the knot. And then that's where you need to tie your knot. So that's how big of a bite that I'm going to use for this one. Similar to how we started with the single figure 8, what we're going to do is I've got, again, the two tails are pinched between my first finger and my thumb. I've got my big bite of rope laying across my palm in the downwards direction here. I just shifted my hand a little bit to give myself more tail to work with. And I'm going to create that finger gun again. I've got the awareness ribbon at this point, or that X, and I'm going to just pinch it with my thumb. I'm going to fold the big bite across the front. And then where my two fingers are right here, I'm going to, instead of pushing the bite through this time, I'm going to take the two strands and push the two strands through. You can see I get the start of the bunny ear that way. And then this bite that I had before is just going, it's now in the back here. It's just going to flip over the bunny ears. And I'm just going to dress it along with the two bottom strands. So now all I'm going to do is pull my ears up and out. And what you can see is I'm going to tighten everything down. Basically that bite strand that we flipped over the top is an adjustment strand, and you can actually loosen it, and you can suck down one ear and make the other ear super long using that if that's something you needed to do. But it's an adjustment strand, and I can make the ears more even that way as well. But you see how it's a bunny ear because it's got two ears right there. To see if this knot's set and dressed, we're gonna make sure everything's again parallel to each other. And you should see two strands on the bottom and three on, I mean, sorry, two on the top and three on the bottom um, for that knot. And again, at least 4 inches for that tail. So that's the double 8, and basically that's where, you know, it would clip into 2 anchors like that. Cool. So that's the family of 8s. Does anybody have any questions so far? All right. I'm not going to show the fusion knot or the bowline on a bite unless somebody wants to see them. They are options, but they're not part of the NCRC or VTC curriculum. The next knot that I'm going to go into is the butterfly knot. It's also sometimes known as an alpine butterfly. There's really no difference between a butterfly and an alpine butterfly. It's just the nomenclature. There's 2 ways to tie it that I can show. One of them will stick with some people, sometimes both stick with people, but like both ways are legitimate. The butterfly is a tri-loadable knot, and I will show you in a second what that means. The way that I like to tie it is I do a twist method. So what you can see here is I've taken a bite of rope. I'm going to twist it once. I like to stick my thumb right above that twist, and then I twist it a second time in the same direction. What I do then is, this is an alien, this is his head, my thumb is currently in his body, and then he has 2 legs. I'm going to take the head, and I'm just going to drape the head slowly over my thumb so that the whole of the head is also over my thumb. So it's basically, my thumb is carrying 2 holes right now, you can see. And then the head goes between his legs and up his butt. And that is the butterfly knot. So the butterfly knot is only set and dressed once you have pulled his legs apart. And so what we've got here is, that's the head of the knot. And you can see like it's got 2 wings. Basically, what you want to know is that the wings are both facing on the same direction, on the same plane. They're both on the front of the knot. I've got a bow tie X in the front, and it should have parallel strands in the back. Again, we like to have a 2 to 4 inch bite for the knot, so that it doesn't, you know, suck on through, and it's set and dressed when its legs are pulled apart. Now, the reason why we call this a tri-loadable knot is that you can pull force on the legs, each leg in opposite directions, and pull force on this head, and it can withstand force in all 3 directions. This is an advantage when you need to have, like, whoops, rope going up and down, for example. Like if this is something that needed to isolate a bad spot in a piece of rope, I can climb and rappel on this, past this knot, and continue to climb and rappel on this. Now, if I were to do something like that on an 8, unfortunately, the 8 wants to actually roll out. And so like if I were to take, here's a figure 8, and I were to pull it in opposite directions, do you see how it's kind of starting to roll on itself? That's not good, right? Like that could capsize in some weird way, and we really don't want to see that happen. So the butterfly is used in applications where we need to be able to load in 3 directions. And so like this is a pretty elegant solution for that, where it's both legs go in places and this knot can go places as well. But anyway, that's why you don't isolate mid-rope problems with a figure 8, because it does this scary thing here. Cool. that is one way to tie the butterfly. So I'll do that one more time, where it is um, bite of rope, single twist. I stick my thumb in over the twist it one more time, drape it over my thumb, and then the head goes between his legs and up his butt. So that's the twist method of doing the the alpine butterfly. There's also a hand wrap method. Now the hand wrap method, like you just need to like pay very close attention to the direction when you're doing things. And both actually have iterations. The alpine butterfly actually has iterations as well, where you can get to like a double alpine butterfly, but it's not something that's commonly used in cave rigging. So I'm not going to go into that today. But if you ever want to learn it, I guess message me or something like that. Um, but okay, cool. So the hand wrap method of doing the alpine butterfly, you can what you start with is you put your palm out. You're going to take your rope and you're going to wrap it around your hand 3 times. So 1, 2, 3 wraps. The way that I like to do this is I will stick a finger under the top rope, uh, pick out the middle rope, and then I draw that out, and it goes over both of the other strands that are still wrapped on my hand, and then goes through the middle where my hand used to be. And at this point, if I pull the 2 legs, I end up with an alpine butterfly again. I'll do that one more time. This one's a really useful knot in my opinion. So 1, 2, 3 wraps around the hand, under the top strand, pick out the middle strand, and then it goes over both that are still on my hand and through the middle, and that is an alpine butterfly. Cool. Um, that knot is used for things like anchors, and it's also used for isolating bad portions of rope. And then, like I said, if you had something that needs to be like midline, it makes a really good knot for that. I personally like to use it on my cow's tails on my personal frog system, simply because it can be loaded in 3 directions, and when you have 2 tails and they're sitting on your D-ring, well, it's 3 directions, so um, that works out pretty good. So the next knot, and I'm gonna adjust my screen here, and you guys are gonna look at my living room mess. I've got a couple carabiners on my chair anchor here, and what I've got is this is an HMS carabiner, and maybe I can take it off and show it to you guys first. Um, this is an HMS carabiner, and this is the best option for the Munter hitch. So the Munter hitch is used for both progress capture and for lowering. It's a basically belay hitch. Um, the the thing that's nice about this HMS carabiner for that is it's HMS actually stands for it like half clove hitch something something in German, and it actually was designed specifically for doing Munter hitches. Uh, and so like that's where the abbreviation HMS comes from, is it's named after the Munter hitch in German. And so what you'll notice about this carabiner is it's got a pinchy end, and then it's got this wide head. And on mine, you can actually kind of see the wear marks from the rope. It's a blue carabiner, but there's like the paint's rubbed off right here and here. And that's because that's where the rope rubs when you tie a Munter hitch. Normally on a carabiner, this is a D carabiner, the rope likes to load along the spine, and the spine is the strongest part of the carabiner. Well, if you used a Munter hitch on a D carabiner, the fact that there's 2 places where the rope is going to touch it, and because it's a moving hitch, it has a tendency to want to flop over this corner. And once it's flopped over the corner, it gets stuck. And then it's not moving. And then you have a problem because you can't like get it back over the corner when it's loaded. So now you're real stuck, and that's not good. So the D carabiner actually does not cooperate really well with a munter hitch. But the D carabiner is great for things like, positioning rope along the spine, which is the strongest portion of the carabiner. Um, I have a bunch of ovals here. Now, what I like to say about oval carabiners is they don't do any job well, but they can do all of the jobs. So it's not specialized to load weight directly against the spine the way that a D carabiner does. It would actually kind of load it along this axis here, and then it equally loads the gate and the spine, which is not a problem because these guys are rated for 27 or 28 kilonewtons. I don't know if you guys can read the spine there. Not a problem, right? So super strong, super good enough. But because it's got this rounded head over here, the munter hitch will actually go over this and not get caught anywhere. So I like ovals a lot. Uh, great, great all around carabiner, can be used pretty much anywhere with no problem. So they don't do any job well, but they can do all the jobs. But the HMS was specifically designed for munter hitches, and it's not going to spine load in this case because you can see it's evenly wide across the head. But basically, there's an imaginary axis going down the center here, and because we have two strands of rope, what will be moving along this, basically, it's loading outwardly along the two tripod sort of legs here, if that makes sense. So anyway, I wanted to show you kind of the carabiners since that's kind of involved in the whole process of the munter hitch. So I've got my silly anchor here on my tree, on my chair here. And what I've got is my rope. And what we're going to do in order to tie a munter hitch, HMS carabiner is acronym. I've got a comment here. For Halbmastwerf, I'm not going to pronounce that, Sicherung, which translates to munter hitch belay carabiner. Perfect. So like the carabiner was designed specifically for this hitch. Great option to get one of these. If not, do not use a D because you will get stuck over the corner. You can use an oval. All right. The more we know. So to tie a munter hitch, what we're going to do is first make a loop. And then on the strand that basically is crossed over, we're just going to bring the rope around the front and then trace the loop that we just made. And so you can see where I've got now a bite that is around just this one strand like that. And I'm going to clip my carabiner through there. And as you can see, like I can run the rope through, and the other thing I can do is flip it and it will run in the other direction. So it flips and then it runs. And basically what this is going to do is it can create a belay where if I am capturing progress, like somebody's getting hauled up on the line, I'm capturing progress on this munter hitch. All I'm going to do is just milk this munter hitch basically. Or maybe there's a lot of weight on here and, we're lowering somebody down with it. All I'm going to do is I'm going to grip it, and you can twist the rope like this, and that will break it be a break to stop the person. But basically, you can use gravity to like let their weight down. So now one thing that you want to remember is that you want to lock this off in descent mode at all times. If you lock it off in the ascent, like you were capturing progress going up, basically you would end up getting this hitch kind of stuck. So you always flip it to lower first. Now you can also work this collar. So if you want to like reduce the amount of slack, you can actually pull the slack through the collar and then just adjust it into the other strand. But in order to lock this off, so call this strand, what do I have here? This strand is in descent right now, so this is my main line strand. And then I've got this tail over here. All I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the tail of the rope, and I'm going to create the number 4 over it. So you can see where I flopped a bight over the mainline strand. And with the flopped over bight, all I'm going to do is pull a bight through that, pull it tight down onto the munter hitch. And then using this big bight here, all I'm going to do is tie an overhand knot. So basically what we've done is we've created a half hitch and an overhand for the lock off. And the way to sort of think of it for the people who do vertical work, it's like a soft lock and then your hard lock. That's all that is. So when you want to release the munter later, all you're going to do is you're going to grab the hitch and pinch it against the carabiner so no weight can get lost on it. We're going to undo the overhand knot. And then using the tail of the half hitch, you can just pull the half hitch through, pull the strands back into parallel, and then you can lower again. But we'll do that lock off one more time. So it's basically just flopping a bight over the rope. You're going to push a bight through that, tighten it down towards the munter hitch. And using this big bight now, we're going to just loop around the rope fully, find the cross of that, and then you're going to tie off with an overhand with the bight facing outwards and down. And that's it. So that's the munter hitch with its lock off. I'm going to stay using this HMS even though I don't need the HMS right now. Now, the next knot that we'll talk about is the clove hitch. The clove hitch is used in NCRC more for like tying the bridles onto the Furno. So basically the patient packaging that they use there to like put somebody into like it's called a Furno, basically the item that we use to like carry a person out of a cave, has bridles at the top. And I'm not going to go into the whole logic behind bridles, but basically the clove hitch in the NCRC world is most commonly used for that. Now you can use a clove hitch for like rigging, and like one of the cool ways somebody taught me how to like tie one, like all you have to do is like cross your arms over each other and then it'll loop, and then you can like do this and boom, we have a clove hitch, right? And what this hitch does is you can see like I've got it hitched around my thumb. This is not going to go anywhere. It's the opposite of a munter hitch where if I pull these two strands, they're not going to go anywhere now. Now, tying a clove hitch on a bight like that is great in like the rock climbing world. It's just not very commonly used in the NCRC world, simply because we're typically not slipping the clove hitch over something. We're typically like anchoring something with it. So in this particular case, I'm going to do it around this carabiner again, just for like clarity, and hopefully the head on this is wide enough for me to demo it effectively with you guys. But effectively, what you're going to do is create a loop. You're going to come across the front, and then we're going to half hitch it a second time around. And let me just make sure that no, that's a girth hitch. Let's see. Did I do that correctly? Forgive me, as this looks very strange in my brain right now. Okay, there we go. So we created the loop. We come around the back here, come back through the anchor and then down, and basically you can see where it's locked the rope down in both places. And so we've got a clove hitch there. Now, again, this is another knot that can capsize. So what you're going to do is lock it off. And what you can do with the lock off, let me give myself more to work with here. Sorry. So let me take it out completely and do that again for you guys. We're going to go through. We're going to create a loop and pinch it. Come around the back here. Come back through over the carabiner and down through our loop, and we should have two crossed X's. And what we want to do then is tie an overhand knot in order to stop or knot it. So the most common way that is described in trying to tie the clove hitch over an object like that is think of it as two half hitches getting tied. The other way that you can also use the clove hitch is instead of around a horizontal configuration like that, if you were to clove hitch around a tree, it is considered an anchor as well. And when I do that, what I do is I create this cross here. So I find that loop, I create a cross, and then I come around a second time and push the rope through where that cross is. And you can see now I have this X again, where it's got the two strands captured under that. Again, you can't just use that the way that it is. And what I would normally do is I flip this around to the back, and then I have the front end here. And I like to personally, when I'm anchoring a tree like this, do the barrel knot as my lock off. And so I'll show you guys the barrel knot a little bit more close up in a second, because we're about to do the double fisherman's. But basically that would be with a long enough tail, and if my anchor wasn't actually a chair, maybe if it was a tree, you could rappel off of that. The disadvantage to that is hard tied to the tree. And so if you needed to release it for some reason, that is very hard tied. So we'll talk about the double fisherman's knot next. And that's how we create prusiks. So I've got a piece of prusik cord here, and this is just a 6mm dynamic rope. And did I lose the teams? Oops. I did not. Okay. So basically what I've got here is a prusik cord. It's a 6mm dynamic cord. I sometimes get asked, oh, but what? I hear Dyneema is super strong. Shouldn't I just like buy Dyneema for it? Dynamic rope versus Dyneema are two very different things. Dynamic rope wants to stretch, and it'll take, it's meant to take falls and stuff, because that's what rock climbers use, and they do a lot of falling. Dyneema, on the other hand, is ultra static, and Dyneema is something that you actually do not want to use for a friction hitch. When you look at the manual for Dyneema, it talks about how the melting point for Dyneema material is very, very low. And if it's used in the application of a friction hitch, the amount of friction that is generated can actually melt the Dyneema. So you don't want to use Dyneema for a friction hitch like a prusik. It's super strong and great for other applications like anchoring and things like that, but you need a dynamic cord instead for your prusik, because dynamic will compress and will grip nicely for a prusik. Now, when we select prusik cord, typically the rule of thumb is that a thinner diameter has a better turn radius, a better bend radius against the rope that you're going to friction hitch onto. So a thinner diameter cord actually will grip better for the application of a prusik. But what is the minimum like diameter distance that you need? So if I were to like reference on rope, for example, the formula that they give for selecting your prusik cord is that if you take 11 millimeter cord, for example, or 11 millimeter rope, for example, you at minimum need to get, or at maximum, I guess, need to get 8 millimeter cord. So the answer is take your rope diameter minus 3 millimeters, and that's the maximum cord that will actually grip on the rope. The the thing to think about there is for people who don't weigh a whole heck of a lot, using a little bit of a thinner cord may actually give you more of that bend radius that gives you more friction and may actually help you. So for prusik cord, I personally choose 6 mil pretty often because 6 mil seems to grip pretty good for me. And when you read the manufacturer specs on this, it can totally hold my weight, no problem. So I'm not very worried about that. So that's what I've got here is a 6 mil diameter dynamic cord. And what we're going to end up doing is we're going to join the two ends of this cord using a double fisherman's knot. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to take one end and I'm going to start tying my barrel knot around that. And all that the barrel knot is it's called a double overhand as well. So I create a loop, and where I've come and created that loop, I've got an X here. And on that X, I'm going to basically come back around one more time. So like a second loop, which is why it's called a double overhand. And where that X is, I'm going to just basically take the tail of the rope and I'm going to pull it through. Whoops. Not pull that side through. So you can see that it's got this X shape here that we've created. And so that's only one of the two. I need to do that on the other side, otherwise it's just a single fisherman's, not a double fisherman's. So I've got my other end and I'm just going to loop it again around this piece of cord here. So I lengthen this out. I'm going to create that loop. And then I'm going to find where that X is, and I'm going to come back around to where that X is. Let me just make sure. So what you can see here that I'm about to do is I messed it up because my X's are going to face in opposite directions. That's okay. All I'm going to do is come around from the other direction. And sometimes it's like working with a USB, right? Like the USB, you put it into the thing and then it turns out you had it upside down. That's all it is. So you just loop it around the other way. And I've created my X again. So like you come around, find that X, come around a second time, and where that X was created, you just put the tail in right at that position. I pull on my two strands and tighten it down, and you can see where basically I have two knots here and they both face parallel to each other and they're kind of nested together as two X's. And so that's the double fisherman's, and what that did was it joined the cord into a prusik loop. Now I've got some stiff pit rope here. I'm going to show you guys the prusik hitch. And so the prusik knot will basically lay over that rope. What I like to do with my prusik is I will grab the knot itself because that's a big sturdy thing for me to grab onto. I basically will loop it around the rope 3 times, and so that's called a 3-wrap prusik. So 1, 2, 3. Hitched around itself. What we want to see is that the outer strand is what bridges over everything else. And what I like to do is I roll one side up towards the other, rather than roll both sides together. And when I roll one side up towards the other, it offsets that knot, so it's now out of the way. And if I needed to clip a carabiner into it, I can clip it in very easily now. So that's what the Prusik hitch looks like, is you've got basically this outer strand that bridges over all of the other strands, and everything's lined up. And then I've got this loop here. Why we like Prusik hitches, right? The Prusik hitch can capture progress. So if I were to draw this nice and tight, which it's a little bit stiff right now, but you can see when I pull on it, it doesn't want to go anywhere. And that's why it's a friction hitch, is that when I yank really hard on it, it's not going to go anywhere. And that's how you create progress capture. However, if I were to break the knot, and what all that means is that bridge, if I were to like put pressure on that bridge, it loosens it up, and I can now slide this up and down the rope. And then if I wanted it to stop, I can stop it, and you can see it's not going anywhere. It's just progress capture on the rope. And these things can handle rescue loads that way, which is really cool. So Prusik loop, very, very good. When you hear old time cavers talk about climbing on knots, these are the literal knots that they used to climb on. So that's the double fisherman's and the Prusik hitch. There's only 2 knots left that we have to deal with. And one of them is actually in a piece of webbing, and it's called the water knot. So for a big old piece of webbing like this, you might want to join the ends, right? So if I were to join the ends, I would make a loop. And there's a couple of really cool things you can do with a webbing loop. Now, why we like webbing is webbing costs about 50 cents a foot, whereas rope costs about $1 a foot. So webbing is also super, super strong. And you can build a lot of anchors with it. With it being flat, it can lay against your anchor, like your tree or your rock, very easily. And it's lightweight, it's compact. There's a lot of reasons to like webbing. But in order to create that loop, we're going to just join the ends. And the way to do that is we're going to create an overhand knot first. So we create that loop with an X. We pinch it at the X. We're going to basically pull the tail through. And similar to everything else, we want at least a 4-inch tail. Any less than that, and again, it can back out. So I've got my overhand knot, just regular good old pretzel knot here. And something that makes my life easier when dealing with a webbing knot for water knot is you're going to take the other strand, and all you have to do is trace the overhand that you just tied. So what I like to do is I like to find the back side of the webbing, because tracing it from the belly just is hard. So find the back side of the webbing, and that's the back side right here. And I'm just going to take my end, and I'm just going to trace it. So, you know, just follow where your previous knot was, and boom. It's just a traced overhand, and I have a 4-inch tail on each side, and that's created a big old webbing loop for me. Now, a fun trick with your water knot is on a piece of webbing, if you have a long enough piece, what you can do is kind of wrap it around your body 3 times, and that's approximately the amount that you need to create a diaper seat harness. And 1, 2, 3. I'm gonna do that maybe. So what I'll do is I'm gonna tie a overhand in this long end right here. And this, I may or may not have sized this properly because I was doing it fast, but the formula is to basically wrap it around the person's body 3 times, or you could go like 6 times across the front of their body. Same thing. But I'm going to tie a water knot in there and create myself a hasty harness. And all I'm going to do with that is, now I've got a big loop and there's a long tail here, but all I'm going to do is take that loop, kind of sit my butt into it as a loose loop. I'm going to stick my arms through the ends of the loop, drop the back, reach my arms in and grab it. It is a little loose on me here. That's okay. But you can see where you can create an improvised seat harness like this. I typically take the ends and wrap them around the seat if I ended up with too much, which is what I did. And then I would just clip a carabiner in that, and that's a hasty harness right there, in case I didn't have a seat harness. So that's a fun trick you can do with that, but you can also do basket hitches and wrap 3 pull 2 anchoring, which is all something we teach in NCRC if you come to class there. Cool. And the last knot that I have on the list is the square knot. So square knot is often used in caber coils to close up the caber coil. The other place it's used is when we're rigging like bridles for a sked. It ends up tying the lashings for the sked. Now, there's 2 ways. There's lots of ways to tie the square knot. But basically what you can do is make a bite on one rope, and it's a bend, so it's going to connect 2 ends of rope. So all I did was I created a loop here. And the thing they like to say about the square knot is it's a right over left, left over right. Now I have a tendency to also do this like a USB where I have to do it more than once just to make sure that I got it correct. So I'm gonna tie it like an overhand first, actually. So there's that first overhand knot. I've got this bite that I've now created because of that. And I want my right over left and left over right. So I'm going to have this strand come under and this one go over, and hopefully I've got, nope, I got that incorrect. So I had actually developed a method that actually avoids that problem, but you can see here, these both strands come out this way, these both strands come out under. So both above and both under. And the way that I have made this easier on myself is I tie this by taking a girth hitch first. And so all you do is flip it over itself, take a bite, flip it over itself. You've created a loop. And then I come in with the other strand, and then I flip the loop back out. And the reason why that works is because if the square knot is another thing that likes to capsize. If I were to watch it capsize, it wants to pop straight like this, and then it would slip out on itself. And so basically, if you took the capsizing and reversed the capsizing, you can tie the knot using the capsize done backwards. So all that I do to make it super easy on myself, so I don't have to do a left over right, right over left thing, is I grab a bite, I flip the bite over itself, and then I have created a girth hitch because of that. And so you can see what the loop of the girth hitch looks like. And with that girth hitch in hand, I grab the other end, and then I'm going to come in, and all it did was it looped through the center of that eye. And then I'm taking the loop that I had flipped over and unflipping that. And then when I pull it all tight, I have a square knot. So anyway, that's a very simple way to do it. Cool. So those are the NCRC knots. Within that, the VTC just does the 8 on a bite, the double 8, alpine butterfly, the water knot, double fisherman's, and prusik hitch. So you guys, if you wanted to go to VTC level 1, you have all of those covered as well. But yeah, let me know if you have any questions or concerns. This was recorded, so we will upload this on the GCG YouTube as well. But feel free to holler and let us know at GCG if there's other topics you want us to cover. Cool. Well, thank you guys for joining.
Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
have
for
a good
teaching us.
night.
It was very nice.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you.
Yep.